In the sprawling city of New Meridian on the planet Kepler 442b, where 12 different alien species lived in careful harmony, there existed an unspoken truth that everyone pretended not to see. When tragedy struck the weak, the poor, or the different, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations would turn their heads and whisper about natural selection and resource allocation efficiency. They had perfected societies where suffering was mathematically minimized for the greatest number. They had evolved beyond what they called primitive emotional responses to individual hardship. They had created paradise for the fortunate. But they had never met humans. And they were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy whispered about the species that refused to let anyone fall through the cracks, no matter how much it cost, no matter how illogical it seemed, no matter how impossible the odds. Some called it stubbornness. Others called it foolishness. Humans called it Tuesday. Zara Thok limped through the crowded marketplace of New Meridian's lower district, her makeshift crutch scraping against the metallic ground with each painful step. The crude walking stick, carved from discarded ship hull material, left rust stains on her gray work clothes and bit into her armpit with every movement. 6 months had passed since the industrial accident at the mining facility took her right leg below the knee, and 6 months had passed since she learned exactly how much her life was worth to the Galactic Coalition's member species. The answer was precisely nothing. Around her, the marketplace buzzed with the sophisticated conversations of a dozen alien species conducting their daily business. Tall, elegant Altarians with their crystalline features discussed quantum economics while their bioluminescent patterns pulsed with mathematical precision. Stocky Corvan merchants, their rock-like skin gleaming under the artificial suns, calculated profit margins in their heads while selling exotic materials from the outer rim. Ethereal Valerian traders floated past, their gaseous forms contained within environmental suits, debating the philosophy of resource distribution as they examined rare atmospheric compounds. Each species represented thousands of years of evolution, technological advancement, and social progress. Each had eliminated poverty, disease, and want from their homeworlds through careful planning, logical resource allocation, and what they proudly called optimal societal efficiency. They had built a civilization where suffering was minimized through mathematical precision. And not one of them had spare parts for a Thok. Zara's species was what the Coalition termed recently integrated. The Thok homeworld had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago, and their population numbered barely 10 million across 3 small colony worlds. They were humanoid enough to interact with most Coalition species but biologically distinct enough that medical compatibility was limited. Their bone density was higher than most species, their muscle fibers worked differently, and their nervous systems operated on frequencies that didn't match standard Coalition prosthetic technology. Unfortunate biological incompatibility, the Altarian doctor had explained to her with the same tone one might use to describe a mathematical error. The cost of developing specialized prosthetics for such a small population demographic would be inefficient. Perhaps your people should consider genetic modification to better integrate with existing medical infrastructure. The Corvan Social Services Administrator had been more direct. Limited resources must be allocated where they provide maximum benefit. Retrofitting our systems for statistical outliers is not economically viable. The Valerian philosopher had been almost poetic in their dismissal. Individual suffering is regrettable, but the greater harmony requires us to focus our energies where they can elevate the most souls. It was all very logical. It was all very reasonable. It was all very civilized. And it left Zara hobbling through the marketplace on a piece of scrap metal, watching her savings dwindle as she tried to find work that she could perform with one leg and a rapidly weakening spirit. She paused at a fruit vendor's stall, counting the few credits in her worn pouch. The Altarian vendor noticed her approach and his crystalline features flickered with what might have been sympathy. Nutrition supplements would be more efficient for your caloric needs, he suggested gently. These fruits are primarily for sensory enjoyment. Zara nodded and moved on. He was right, of course. Nutrition supplements were cheaper, more practical, and provided exactly what her body needed to survive. The fruit was a luxury she couldn't afford, a small pleasure that served no logical purpose. She continued through the marketplace, past the Corvan blacksmith whose powered tools could craft anything but wouldn't waste time on a custom prosthetic for a single customer. Past the Valerian Meditation Center where they taught acceptance of life's natural limitations. Past the Altarian Research Facility where they studied thousands of fascinating problems but none that would help someone like her. The lower district was where the statistical anomalies lived. The few individuals who didn't quite fit into the coalition's perfected systems. Most were elderly members of various species who had lived past their society's standard lifespans. Some were victims of rare accidents or illnesses that fell outside normal medical protocols. A handful were like Zara, members of smaller species whose needs didn't justify large-scale solutions. They weren't abandoned, exactly. The coalition provided basic nutrition supplements, minimal housing, and access to standard medical care. They weren't cruel about it. They simply operated on the principle that resources should be allocated where they could do the most good for the most people. It was efficient. It was logical. It made perfect sense. It just wasn't enough for someone who wanted to do more than merely exist. Zara had been a mining engineer before the accident. She had designed extraction systems and optimized or processing workflows. She had been good at her job, proud of her contributions to her small colony's economy. Now, she couldn't even stand long enough to operate a food synthesizer without exhausting herself. She made her way to the Day Labor Exchange, a small building where those in the lower district could find temporary work suited to their limitations. The Corvin administrator looked up from his workstation as she entered. "Ah, FAC designation Zara. I have a data entry position available. Seated work, minimal movement required. 4 hours, basic credit compensation. Data entry. Taking information from one system and putting it into another. Mind-numbing, repetitive work that barely paid enough to cover her daily nutrition supplements. But it was work, and work was dignity, even if it wasn't much of either." "I'll take it," she said. The administrator nodded and transferred the work details to a small tablet. "Workstation 7. Begin whenever you're ready." Zara made her way to the designated workstation and settled into the chair with relief. Sitting didn't hurt. Sitting was almost normal. She activated the terminal and began the tedious process of transferring shipping manifests from old paper records to digital files. Each entry required her to read a handwritten line, interpret abbreviations and codes, and input the data correctly into the system. It was boring. It was mindless. It was exactly the kind of work that any automated system could do in seconds. But automation cost money, and the company paying for this work had determined that hiring lower district residents for below subsistence wages was more cost-effective than upgrading their systems. It was logical. It was efficient. It made perfect sense. Around her, other residents of the lower district performed similar tasks. An elderly Altarian with vision problems too specific for standard corrective procedures sorted small components by shape and color. A Corvin with joint deterioration that didn't respond to normal treatments folded packaging materials. A Valerian whose environmental suit had malfunctioned and left them with chronic respiratory issues tested air quality sensors. They worked in quiet concentration, grateful for the opportunity to earn a few credits, careful not to complain about the conditions or the pay. Complaining would be illogical. This was the best allocation of resources available to them. 3 hours into her shift, Zara's terminal chimed with an error message. The shipping manifest she was trying to enter contained codes that weren't in the system's database. She tried several variations, checked her typing, and attempted to research the codes through the terminal's limited reference system. Nothing worked. She raised her hand to signal the work supervisor, a efficient Altarian who managed the facility's daily operations. "Problem with entry 774 Alpha," Zara explained when the supervisor approached. "The manifest contains cargo codes that aren't recognized by the system." The supervisor examined the screen, his crystalline features flickering as he processed the information. "Ah. These appear to be legacy codes from a discontinued shipping classification system. The conversion protocols were deemed economically inefficient to maintain. So what should I do with this entry? Mark it as unprocessable and move to the next manifest." The client will address the discrepancy through alternative channels. Zara stared at the screen. The manifest contained details about a cargo shipment worth thousands of credits. Food supplies, medical equipment, and construction materials destined for a small colony on the outer rim. Someone needed those supplies. Someone was expecting them. Someone had paid for them to be delivered. And, because it was economically inefficient to maintain conversion protocols for discontinued codes, the shipment would be delayed while the client figured out how to solve the problem through alternative channels. "Isn't there any way to manually convert the codes?" she asked. "I could research the old system, figure out what these codes correspond to in the current classification." The supervisor's patterns dimmed slightly. "That would require significantly more time than budgeted for this task. The client pays for standard data entry, not research and problem solving. Such services would need to be negotiated separately at specialized consulting rates." "But the shipment will be handled appropriately through established protocols," the supervisor finished firmly. "Please mark the entry as unprocessable and continue with your assigned tasks." Zara marked the entry as requested and moved to the next manifest. But her mind kept returning to those discontinued codes. In her previous work as a mining engineer, she had dealt with similar classification problems. Old mining surveys used different geological terminology than current standards. Equipment specifications changed over time. Data conversion was a constant challenge. But it was a solvable challenge. With the right research, the right cross-references, the right determination to make things work instead of simply accepting that they didn't, most compatibility problems could be overcome. She finished her 4-hour shift and collected her modest payment, her mind still working on the code conversion problem. On her way home, she stopped at the district's small library, a collection of reference materials too outdated or specialized to be worth digitizing but too potentially useful to discard. The Corvin librarian nodded as she entered. "Research materials today, FAQ designation Zara?" "Looking for old shipping classification systems. Anything from about 10 to 20 years ago. Efficiency Archives, Section 7. Most of those systems were discontinued due to optimization protocols." "I know. That's the problem." She spent the next 2 hours digging through dusty reference manuals and obsolete technical documents. The library was quiet except for the soft sounds of a few other lower district residents conducting their own research into problems that no longer seemed worth solving. Finally, she found what she was looking for. A comprehensive cross-reference guide for shipping classifications, published 15 years ago when the Coalition had standardized cargo coding systems across all member worlds. The guide contained conversion tables, exception protocols, and detailed explanations for handling legacy data. She copied the relevant sections onto a portable datapad and made her way home to the small efficiency apartment that represented the sum total of what the Coalition considered adequate housing for a disabled FAQ. That night, working by the dim light of a single illumination panel, she manually converted every code from the unprocessable shipping manifest. It took her 3 hours. It required cross-referencing multiple outdated systems. It was tedious, time-consuming work that no automated system was programmed to handle. It was also completely successful. Every code converted perfectly. Every item on the manifest could be properly classified and processed. The next morning, she returned to the day labor exchange and requested to speak with the work supervisor. "I completed the conversion for Manifest 774 Alpha," she said, handing him the datapad. "All legacy codes have been translated to current classifications." The supervisor examined her work, his crystalline features brightening as he verified the accuracy of her conversions. "This is quite comprehensive. How did you acquire the reference materials for these obsolete systems?" "Library research. The conversion guides still exist, they're just not digitally accessible." "I see." The supervisor paused, considering. This type of specialized problem solving is not typically within the scope of basic data entry work. "I know. But the shipment can be processed now instead of being delayed indefinitely." "Yes." Another pause. "The client pays additional fees for problem resolution services." This work would qualify for specialized consulting compensation. Zara felt a small spark of something she hadn't experienced in months. Would you be willing to offer me similar work if other legacy conversion problems arise? If your work proves reliable, it would be economically efficient to maintain a specialist consultant for these issues rather than delay shipments. It wasn't much. It wasn't a career. It wasn't anywhere close to the engineering work she had done before her accident. But it was better than mindless data entry. It was problem solving. It was using her mind for something more complex than transferring numbers from one column to another. And it was proof that sometimes, when the established systems failed, individual determination could find solutions that efficiency protocols had deemed unworthy of pursuit. She worked 3 more consulting jobs that week, each one involving legacy data that standard systems couldn't process. Word spread quietly through the lower district's informal networks. Other residents began bringing her conversion problems, compatibility issues, and technical challenges that fell outside normal support channels. None of it paid well. None of it was officially recognized as valuable work. But it was work that made a difference, work that solved real problems for real people who had been told their problems weren't worth solving. As she walked home from the library that Friday evening, research notes for another obsolete system tucked into her worn shoulder bag, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced since before her accident. Purpose. Not just existence, not just survival, but actual purpose. The Coalition's member species had built efficient societies by focusing resources where they could do the most good for the most people. It was a logical approach. It minimized suffering and maximized benefit according to careful mathematical analysis. But mathematics didn't account for the cargo shipments that sat indefinitely in processing limbo because their codes were obsolete. Mathematics didn't account for the small businesses that lost money while waiting for someone to solve inefficient compatibility problems. Mathematics didn't account for the individuals who fell through the cracks of even the most carefully designed systems. Mathematics, as it turned out, had gaps. And Zara was discovering that she had a talent for finding solutions that fit into those gaps. She paused at the fruit vendor's stall, counting the credits in her pouch. Her consulting work had earned her enough for more than just nutrition supplements. "Those look good," she said, pointing to a selection of exotic fruit from the Outer Rim colonies. The Altarian vendor's crystalline features brightened. "They are indeed excellent quality. A bit expensive for purely nutritional purposes, but the sensory experience is quite remarkable." Sometimes, Zara said, selecting several pieces of fruit, inefficiency is exactly what you need. The vendor processed her payment and handed her the fruit with what she was learning to recognize as genuine Altarian puzzlement. "An interesting perspective," he said carefully. "Most of our customers prefer to optimize their resource allocation." "Most of your customers," Zara replied, "probably haven't learned the value of finding solutions that don't exist yet." She made her way home through the lower district, her makeshift crutch striking the metallic ground with the same scraping sound as always. Her gait was still uneven, still painful, still a constant reminder of what she had lost. But, for the first time in 6 months, it didn't feel like a symbol of defeat. It felt like a challenge. And challenges, she was remembering, were things she was good at solving. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered through the lower district's standard communication network, a collection of outdated terminals that the Coalition maintained for essential information distribution to residents who couldn't afford personal communication devices. Zara hobbled to the community terminal building, her makeshift crutch leaving its familiar trail of rust marks on the polished floor. The message queue contained the usual collection of administrative notices, work assignments, and system updates that kept the lower district functioning at minimal acceptable levels. But, today, there was something different. The message bore an unfamiliar sender designation, a long string of numbers and letters that didn't match any Coalition administrative department, commercial entity, or resident identification code she recognized. The subject line was equally cryptic: reference request, legacy system compatibility solutions. Zara opened the message with the cautious curiosity of someone who had learned to expect disappointment but still hoped for pleasant surprises. "Greetings, Thok designation Zara. Your work on shipping classification conversions has been brought to our attention through informal professional networks. We represent a privately funded research initiative investigating optimization gaps in current coalition systems. Your approach to legacy compatibility problems aligns with our current project requirements. Would you be available for consultation work on a more comprehensive scale? Compensation would exceed standard lower district rates. Please respond if interested. The message was signed with another cryptic designation, Human Cultural Exchange Initiative, Project Coordinator Martinez. Zara read the message 3 times, trying to process what it meant. She had heard of humans, of course. Everyone in the coalition had heard of humans. They were the newest species to join the galactic community, integrated just 5 years ago after their discovery by a Valerian exploration vessel. The official reports described them as a relatively primitive species from a small planet in an unremarkable star system. They had achieved basic spaceflight technology and showed promise for eventual advancement to coalition standards. Their integration process was proceeding according to established protocols, with cultural education and technological mentorship provided by experienced member species. But there were also unofficial stories. Whispered conversations in the marketplace about humans who refused to follow standard procedures. Rumors about human settlements that operated outside normal efficiency protocols. Strange tales about humans who seemed to believe that individual problems were worth solving regardless of cost-benefit analysis. Most coalition citizens dismissed these stories as integration difficulties. Every newly discovered species went through a period of cultural adjustment as they learned to operate within civilized society. Humans would eventually understand the logic of resource optimization and social efficiency. They always did. But the stories persisted. And now, apparently, some humans were conducting their own research initiatives. Zara composed a careful response, indicating her interest in learning more about the consultation opportunity. She sent the message and returned to her small apartment to wait. The response came within 6 hours, faster than any coalition administrative department had ever replied to anything in her experience. Excellent. Please report to Coordinates 127.45.9 in the Industrial District tomorrow at 0800 Standard Time. Ask for Dr. Sarah Martinez at the reception desk. Bring examples of your conversion work and any relevant reference materials. Transportation will be provided for the return journey. The Industrial District was a 2-hour journey from the lower district, accessible only by public transport that ran on limited schedules designed for maximum efficiency rather than convenience. Zara had never had reason to visit the area. It housed advanced manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and corporate headquarters that had no need for the kind of work available to lower district residents. The next morning, she made the difficult journey, her makeshift crutch making the multiple transport transfers more challenging than they should have been. Each vehicle was designed for standard ambulatory passengers. Each station assumed normal mobility. Each connection required navigating obstacles that would have been trivial for someone with 2 functional legs. By the time she reached the specified coordinates, she was exhausted and running late. The building was a modest facility tucked between 2 larger corporate structures, distinguished only by a small sign reading Human Cultural Exchange Initiative in several languages. The reception area was unlike anything Zara had seen in coalition facilities. Instead of the efficient, minimalist design favored by most species, the space contained an eclectic mixture of furniture, decorations, and equipment that seemed to prioritize comfort over optimization. Soft seating areas were arranged for conversation rather than traffic flow. Personal photographs and artwork decorated the walls alongside technical diagrams and project charts. A small food preparation area offered actual food instead of nutrition supplements. The receptionist was a young human woman with dark skin and kind eyes who looked up with genuine concern as Zara struggled through the entrance. "You must be Zara. I'm Dr. Martinez. Please, sit down and catch your breath. That's quite a journey from the lower district." Zara settled into a chair that was surprisingly comfortable and found herself studying the first human she had ever met in person. Dr. Martinez was smaller than the official reports suggested humans typically were, with features that seemed somehow more expressive than most coalition species. Her movements had an energy and directness that felt different from the measured efficiency that characterized interactions in civilized society. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Martinez continued. "I know the trip isn't easy, especially with limited mobility options. Would you like something to eat or drink before we begin? Actual food, not supplements." The offer was so unexpected that Zara almost declined out of reflexive habit. In coalition facilities, refreshments were provided only when nutritionally necessary or socially required according to established protocols. Offering food to a visitor for comfort rather than efficiency was inefficient. "That would be nice," she found herself saying. Dr. Martinez prepared what she called coffee, a hot beverage with a complex flavor profile that served no apparent nutritional purpose, and a small meal consisting of foods that had been prepared for taste rather than optimal caloric delivery. As they ate, she explained the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative. "We're officially a research project studying integration challenges between human culture and coalition systems," Dr. Martinez said. "Unofficially, we're trying to figure out why so many things that work perfectly on paper seem to fail real people when they need help most." "That's an interesting research focus," Zara said carefully. "It's a necessary one. When humans joined the coalition, we were told that we would have access to the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Medicine that could cure anything, technology that could solve any problem, social systems that had eliminated want and suffering." Dr. Martinez paused to take a sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful. "And it's true, mostly. If you fit within standard parameters, if your needs align with existing systems, if your problems have already been solved for someone else, the coalition can provide remarkable support. But, if you're an edge case, if you need something that doesn't already exist, if you're a statistical anomaly, you learn about efficiency protocols," Zara finished. "Exactly. And humans have this annoying tendency to believe that statistical anomalies are still people who deserve help." Dr. Martinez led Zara to a workshop area that looked like a collision between a research laboratory and a mechanical repair shop. Advanced coalition technology sat alongside primitive human tools and improvised equipment that seemed to follow no standard design principles. "We've been studying what we call optimization gaps," Dr. Martinez explained. "Problems that fall outside standard solution parameters. Situations where the most efficient approach is to accept that some things can't be fixed rather than investing resources in custom solutions." She gestured to a wall covered with charts, diagrams, and case studies. "Medical conditions too rare to justify specialized treatment. Technical problems too specific to warrant system modifications. Individual needs that don't scale to population-level solutions. The coalition has eliminated most suffering by focusing on problems that affect large numbers of people. But that approach inherently leaves gaps. And you're trying to fill those gaps? We're trying to understand them. Humans come from a species that evolved on a planet where individual survival often depended on the group's willingness to invest disproportionate resources in helping one person. We're culturally predisposed to see optimization gaps as problems to solve rather than acceptable losses." Dr. Martinez showed Zara several ongoing projects. A communication device designed for a Valerian with a unique environmental suit malfunction that standard interfaces couldn't accommodate. A mobility aid for an elderly Corvan whose joint deterioration followed an unusual pattern. A food preparation system for an Altarian with rare dietary restrictions. Each project represented a custom solution to a problem that affected one individual. Each had required significant research, development, and testing. Each was exactly the kind of specialized work that efficiency protocols deemed economically unviable. "Your shipping classification work caught our attention because it demonstrates the same approach," Dr. Martinez said. "Finding solutions for problems that official systems have abandoned. We'd like to offer you a position as a consulting specialist." "What kind of work would that involve?" "Problem solving. Research. Development of custom solutions for individual needs that don't fit existing frameworks. The pay would be significantly better than lower district rates, and we'd provide transportation support and any equipment you need." Zara looked around the workshop, taking in the evidence of ongoing projects that served no purpose except helping people who had been told their problems weren't worth solving. What's the catch? Dr. Martinez smiled, an expression that seemed more genuine than the polite communication gestures used by most coalition species. The catch is that this work is viewed as inefficient by coalition standards. We operate with private funding and special cultural exchange permits that allow us some flexibility in resource allocation. But we're not officially supported by standard systems. So this is unauthorized? This is human. Which means we do things that seem illogical to other species. We invest disproportionate resources in individual problems. We refuse to accept that some people can't be helped. We believe that finding solutions for one person today creates knowledge that can help more people tomorrow. Zara considered the offer. Working with humans would mean stepping outside the established systems that governed lower district life. It would mean taking risks, challenging efficiency protocols, and pursuing solutions that had no guarantee of success. It would also mean having work that mattered. Work that solved real problems for real people. Work that used her mind for something more complex than accepting limitations. I'm interested, she said. Dr. Martinez extended her hand in what Zara had learned was a human gesture of agreement. Welcome to the team. Let's start by showing you what we're working on for other people facing mobility challenges. She led Zara to a section of the workshop where several humans were collaborating on what appeared to be a prosthetic leg. But, unlike the standard coalition prosthetics she had been shown by various medical departments, this device was clearly custom designed for non-standard anatomy. This is for a Corvan whose bone structure doesn't match standard prosthetic interfaces, Dr. Martinez explained. Coalition medical protocols determined that modification would require custom engineering that wasn't cost-effective for a single patient. So you're doing the custom engineering anyway? We're doing the research that should have been done in the first place. Understanding how to adapt existing technology for biological variations that don't fit standard parameters. One of the human engineers looked up from his work. The basic technology is sound. The coalition has excellent prosthetic systems. They just designed them with the assumption that everyone would fit the same anatomical model. Which works for maybe 80% of cases, another engineer added. But, if you're in the 20% that doesn't fit, you get told that your biology is inefficient, Zara finished. Right. So we're developing adaptation protocols. Ways to modify existing technology for edge cases instead of just abandoning people who don't fit standard parameters. Dr. Martinez turned to Zara with an expression of curiosity. Your case is particularly interesting because thoracic anatomy is documented in coalition medical databases. The information exists to create compatible prosthetics. But, the cost-benefit analysis determined that development wasn't justified for such a small population. I was told that maybe my people should consider genetic modification to be more compatible with existing systems. The workshop fell quiet for a moment. The humans exchanged glances that seemed to communicate something Zara didn't understand. That's certainly one approach, Dr. Martinez said carefully. Modify the patient to fit the treatment rather than modify the treatment to fit the patient. It makes sense from an efficiency standpoint, Zara said. Resources are limited. Systems can't be customized for every individual variation. Resources are limited, Dr. Martinez agreed. But, knowledge isn't. Understanding how to adapt existing technology for individual needs creates information that can help other individuals with similar needs. The research investment pays forward. She gestured to the prosthetic project. What we learn adapting coalition technology for this Corvan's anatomy will help other Corvan with similar needs. What we learn adapting it for thoracic anatomy will help other thoracic. The knowledge accumulates. Assuming other thoracic face similar problems. Assuming that individual problems often represent broader categories of similar problems that haven't been recognized yet. Dr. Martinez showed Zara detailed plans for a prosthetic adaptation project specifically designed for thoracic anatomy. The plans incorporated coalition technology with custom interfaces that accommodated the differences in bone density, muscle attachment, and nerve structure that made standard prosthetics incompatible. "This is theoretical at this point," Dr. Martinez explained. "We'd need to develop and test prototypes, which would require someone willing to participate in an experimental process." Zara studied the plans, recognizing the engineering principles behind the design. The approach was sound. The technology was proven. The adaptation protocols addressed the specific compatibility issues that had made coalition prosthetics unsuitable for her. What would participation involve? Working with our team to develop a custom prosthetic that fits your specific anatomy. Testing prototypes, providing feedback, helping us refine the design. Eventually, if successful, documenting the process so other thought could benefit from the same adaptation protocols. And the risks? Experimental technology always carries risks. The prototypes might not work properly. The adaptation process might require multiple iterations. There's no guarantee of success. Dr. Martinez paused, meeting Zara's eyes directly. But there's also no guarantee of failure. And the alternative is accepting that you'll never have options beyond makeshift solutions and adaptive workarounds. Zara looked around the workshop again, taking in the evidence of human determination to solve problems that others had abandoned. Custom solutions, experimental projects, and ongoing research that served no purpose except helping individuals who had been told their needs weren't worth meeting. It was inefficient. It was expensive. It was risky. It made no sense according to standard resource allocation protocols. It was also the first real hope she had been offered in 6 months. "When would we start?" she asked. Dr. Martinez smiled again, the genuine expression that seemed to contain more warmth than any efficiency protocol would consider necessary. "How about right now? Let's take some measurements and start figuring out exactly what kind of custom interface we're going to need." As the human team began the process of documenting her anatomy and designing adaptation protocols, Zara found herself thinking about optimization gaps. About the spaces between efficient systems where individual needs fell through the cracks. About the difference between accepting limitations and refusing to believe that limitations couldn't be overcome. The coalition had built remarkable systems that minimized suffering for the greatest number of people. They had created societies where want and need were largely eliminated through careful resource allocation and logical prioritization. But they had done it by accepting that some problems were too small, too specific, or too expensive to solve. Humans, apparently, had different ideas about what problems were worth solving. And, for the first time since her accident, Zara was beginning to understand what it meant to be part of a species that refused to let anyone fall through the cracks, no matter how much it cost, no matter how illogical it seemed, no matter how impossible the odds. She was beginning to understand what humans called Tuesday. 3 weeks into the prosthetic development project, Zara had learned more about human engineering philosophy than she had about most coalition species during their entire integration process. Where other civilizations approached problems with systematic efficiency, humans seemed to embrace what Dr. Martinez called productive chaos. The workshop buzzed with constant activity that followed no logical schedule. Engineers worked on multiple projects simultaneously, switching between tasks based on inspiration, availability of materials, or simply because they had thought of a better approach while working on something else. Conversations jumped between technical specifications, theoretical possibilities, and apparently random observations about everything from biological adaptation to the best methods for preparing coffee. It was magnificently inefficient. It was also producing results that traditional approaches had failed to achieve. "The interface calibration is responding better than expected," announced Dr. Chen, one of the biomedical engineers working on Zara's prosthetic adaptation. He was a compact human with steady hands and an apparent inability to work on just one project at a time. "The neural response mapping is adapting to thought nerve frequency patterns faster than our simulations predicted." Zara flexed her residual limb against the testing apparatus, feeling the subtle electrical signals that would eventually control her prosthetic leg. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, like learning to use muscles she had forgotten she possessed. That's encouraging, Dr. Martinez said, reviewing the data readouts. What do you think is accounting for the improved response? Biological flexibility, Dr. Chen replied. Thok nervous systems are more adaptable than coalition medical databases suggested. The standard compatibility testing only measured static responses, not adaptive capacity. Meaning? Meaning the coalition decided Thok anatomy was incompatible with their technology based on initial testing that didn't account for the possibility that biological systems might adapt to new interfaces over time. Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. So they tested for immediate compatibility rather than potential compatibility. Right. It's more efficient to test for instant results than to invest time in allowing adaptation processes to develop. Zara listened to the conversation with growing understanding. The coalition's medical protocols had determined that her biology was incompatible with standard prosthetics because the initial interface tests hadn't worked immediately. The possibility that her nervous system might learn to work with the technology given time and proper calibration had never been explored. It was logical. Testing for immediate compatibility was faster, cheaper, and more predictable than allowing for adaptation periods. From an efficiency standpoint, there was no reason to invest resources in exploring potential compatibility when immediate compatibility was available for other species. But, from a problem-solving standpoint, it meant abandoning solutions that might work simply because they didn't work immediately. How long does the adaptation process typically take? Zara asked. We don't know, Dr. Chen admitted. You're the first Thok we've worked with. But, based on similar projects with other species, anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months for full neural integration. And, coalition medical protocols allow how much time for compatibility testing? Standard prosthetic fitting is completed within 72 hours, Dr. Martinez said. Any issues that can't be resolved within that timeframe are classified as biological incompatibility. Zara stared at the testing apparatus, processing the implications. Her entire species had been written off as incompatible with coalition medical technology because 72 hours wasn't enough time for their nervous systems to adapt to new interfaces. Has anyone suggested extending the testing period? She asked. We have, Dr. Martinez said. The response was that extending testing protocols for minority species would create precedent for special accommodations that could compromise system efficiency. So instead of spending more time on individual cases, they maintain standard procedures that work for the majority. Exactly. It's logical from a resource allocation perspective. Dr. Chen looked up from his calibration work. It's also exactly the kind of thinking that humans find completely unacceptable. Over the following days, Zara worked with the human team on refining the prosthetic interface and began to understand what Dr. Chen meant. Where coalition species approached problems with systematic analysis and standardized solutions, humans seemed to view every challenge as an opportunity for creative problem solving. When the standard neural interface protocols proved inadequate for Thok nerve patterns, instead of concluding that compatibility was impossible, the human engineers developed new protocols. When the prosthetics weight distribution didn't match Thok's skeletal structure, instead of recommending skeletal modification, they redesigned the weight distribution system. When the control algorithms responded too slowly for Thok muscle fiber characteristics, instead of accepting delayed response as a limitation, they rewrote the algorithms. Each problem that would have been classified as an insurmountable incompatibility by coalition standards became a puzzle to solve through human determination and creativity. It's not magic, Dr. Martinez explained during one of their regular progress meetings. It's just a different approach to problem solving. Coalition species optimize for efficiency, which means accepting that some problems aren't worth solving. Humans optimize for solutions, which means refusing to accept that problems can't be solved. But resources are still limited, Zara pointed out. You can't solve every problem for every individual. No, we can't. But we can solve more problems than the coalition believes are worth solving. And we can develop knowledge that makes solving similar problems easier in the future. She gestured to a wall chart tracking their various prosthetic adaptation projects. The techniques we're developing for Thok anatomy will work for other species with similar biological characteristics.
The neural interface protocols we're creating for Corvin joint structures will help anyone with non-standard bone density patterns.
Each individual solution creates tools for helping more individuals.
So the investment in one person's problem pays forward to help other people with similar problems.
Right. Instead of writing off entire categories of people as incompatible, we learn how to make existing technology compatible with broader ranges of biological diversity. The concept was beginning to make sense to Zara, but it also raised questions about why other species hadn't developed similar approaches. Why don't coalition species think this way? She asked. Dr. Martinez considered the question carefully.
I think it's because they solved their major problems so long ago that they've forgotten what it's like to face unsolvable challenges.
When your society has eliminated poverty, disease, and want for the vast majority of your population, the remaining problems start to look like statistical anomalies rather than challenges worth addressing.
And humans?
Humans come from a planet where survival was never guaranteed. We evolved on a world where helping one person through an impossible situation might mean the difference between your community surviving or dying. We're culturally programmed to believe that individual problems are worth solving because individual solutions often turn out to be group advantages.
Dr. Chen joined the conversation, wiping calibration grease from his hands.
Plus, humans are relatively new to having advanced technology.
We haven't had time to develop the assumption that our current systems represent the best possible solutions.
We still think everything can be improved, added Dr. Sarah Kim, a materials engineer who had been working on prosthetic components.
Coalition species have had thousands of years to optimize their technology.
They've reached the point where further improvement seems inefficient compared to working within existing parameters.
But improvement is still possible?
Improvement is always possible, Dr. Kim said firmly. It's just a question of whether you believe it's worth pursuing.
As her prosthetic development progressed, Zara began to see evidence of human improvement philosophy throughout the workshop.
Standard coalition manufacturing equipment had been modified with custom additions that increased precision or expanded capabilities.
Software systems ran with human-developed patches that added functionality the original designers hadn't considered necessary.
Even simple tools showed signs of modification and enhancement that served no purpose except making them work slightly better.
Do you modify everything? She asked Dr. Martinez during a fitting session. We modify anything that can be improved, Dr. Martinez replied.
Coalition technology is excellent, but it's designed for standard applications. When you're working on non-standard problems, you need non-standard tools.
The prosthetic leg itself exemplified this philosophy.
The core technology was standard coalition biomedical engineering, advanced materials, sophisticated control systems, and proven interface protocols. But every component had been modified, adapted, or enhanced for compatibility with Thok anatomy and Zara's specific needs. The result was a prosthetic that was simultaneously more complex and more effective than anything the coalition had offered her. It responded to her neural commands with precision that matched her original limb. It supported her weight without discomfort. It moved with natural fluidity that made walking feel normal rather than mechanical.
It was also completely unique. No other prosthetic like it existed anywhere in the galaxy.
It represented thousands of hours of custom engineering work that would never be cost-effective to duplicate for a single individual according to coalition efficiency protocols. From a human perspective, it was a successful solution to an important problem that had created valuable knowledge for solving similar problems in the future.
How does it feel? Dr. Martinez asked as Zara took her first steps with the completed prosthetic. Like my leg, Zara said, marveling at the naturalness of the movement. Like it was always supposed to be there. Good. That means the neural integration was successful.
Your nervous system has learned to treat the prosthetic as part of your body rather than as external equipment.
Zara walked across the workshop, testing the prosthetic's response to different movements and weight distributions.
The sensation was remarkable, not just functional mobility, but natural mobility that didn't require conscious effort to coordinate.
What happens now? She asked. Now we document everything we learned and start working on the next case, Dr. Martinez said. And you decide whether you want to continue working with us on other projects. Other projects?
Dr. Chen looked up from a workbench where he was already beginning modifications for their next prosthetic adaptation case, a Valerian who needed a specialized environmental suit interface.
We've got a backlog of problems that need custom solutions, he said. Medical devices that don't work for non-standard anatomies. Communication systems that can't handle unique sensory capabilities. Mobility aids that don't accommodate biological variations.
Every case is different, Dr. Kim added.
Every case requires individual research and development.
Every case teaches us something that helps with the next case. Dr. Martinez handed Zara a datapad containing detailed documentation of her prosthetic development process.
This represents everything we learned about adapting coalition technology for thoracic anatomy.
Interface protocols, calibration procedures, material specifications, and neural adaptation timelines.
What will you do with this information? Share it with anyone who needs it. Other thoracic who face similar problems.
Medical researchers who work with minority species.
Engineers who develop prosthetic technology. Knowledge only creates value when it's available to people who can use it.
Zara studied the documentation, recognizing the comprehensive nature of the research that had gone into solving her individual problem. Test results, adaptation protocols, design specifications, and troubleshooting guides that would allow anyone to replicate and improve upon their work.
The coalition medical departments will have access to this? If they want it.
We share our research openly. Whether other organizations choose to use it depends on their priorities.
And if they don't?
Dr. Martinez shrugged. Then, individual people who need custom solutions know where to find help.
We're not trying to change coalition policy.
We're just trying to solve problems that aren't being solved. As Zara prepared to leave the workshop that day, walking normally for the first time in months, she found herself thinking about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. The coalition had built systems that efficiently addressed the needs of the greatest number of people through standardized solutions and resource optimization. Humans had built systems that effectively addressed individual needs through customized solutions and creative problem solving. Both approaches had value. Both achieved important results. But only one approach refused to abandon people whose problems didn't fit existing solutions. Dr. Martinez, she said as she reached the workshop entrance.
I'd like to continue working on other projects. Excellent. Can you start tomorrow? We've got a Corvin engineer with a sensory processing condition that doesn't respond to standard accommodations.
Her employer says she needs to accept her limitations and find different work.
Let me guess.
You think her work environment needs to accept her limitations and find different approaches? Dr. Martinez smiled.
You're learning to think like a human. Is that good or bad? That depends on whether you believe individual problems are worth solving. Zara looked down at her prosthetic leg, then back at the workshop where human engineers were already working on solutions for the next person who had been told their needs weren't worth meeting.
I think, she said, that I'm beginning to understand what humans call Tuesday. Walking home through the lower district that evening, her movement natural and pain-free for the first time since her accident, Zara noticed things she had missed during months of difficult hobbling.
Other residents struggling with mobility challenges. People working around limitations that no one had bothered to address.
Individuals adapting to problems that could potentially be solved if anyone considered them worth solving. She also noticed something else. Several people stared at her prosthetic leg with expressions of curiosity and hope rather than the resignation she had grown accustomed to seeing in the lower district. Word, it seemed, was beginning to spread about humans and their peculiar belief that individual problems were worth solving. And change, she realized, sometimes started with one person walking normally down a street where normal wasn't supposed to be possible. 6 months after Zara's prosthetic fitting, the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative had grown from a modest workshop to a sprawling complex that occupied 3 buildings in the industrial district. What had started as a small research project investigating optimization gaps had evolved into something that was beginning to attract attention throughout the coalition.
Not all of the attention was positive. FOC designation Zara, report to Administrative Center 7 immediately. The message appeared on Zara's work terminal early Monday morning.
The sender was identified as Coalition Integration Oversight, a department she had never heard of but whose name carried ominous implications. She made her way to the administrative center, walking normally on her human-designed prosthetic through the gleaming corridors of the Coalition's central district. The building was a monument to efficient organization, every surface optimized for easy maintenance, every space designed for maximum utility, every system streamlined for logical operation. The waiting area outside Administrative Center 7 exemplified Coalition efficiency.
Standardized seating arranged for optimal traffic flow.
Information displays providing precisely the data needed for routine administrative interactions.
Environmental controls set to specifications that accommodated the average comfort requirements of all Coalition species.
It was perfectly functional and completely impersonal. After exactly 14 minutes, the standard waiting period for non-urgent administrative consultations, Zara was directed to a conference room where 3 officials representing different Coalition departments sat behind a curved desk designed to project authority through geometric precision. The Altarian official spoke first, his crystalline features displaying the cool professionalism that characterized all high-level Coalition interactions.
FOC designation Zara, you have been employed by an organization designated as Human Cultural Exchange Initiative for the past 6 months. This employment relationship has come to our attention due to certain irregularities in resource allocation and procedural compliance. The Corvin official, her rock-like skin gleaming under the administrative lighting, added her own concerns. Records indicate that you have received medical treatment that exceeded standard allocation parameters for your demographic category.
Such treatment required custom development of specialized equipment that has not been approved through normal Coalition medical protocols. The third official was Valerian, their gaseous form contained within a standard environmental suit that masked any emotional indicators. Additionally, your employment with the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative involves work that duplicates services already provided through established Coalition departments, potentially creating inefficient redundancy in resource utilization.
Zara looked at the 3 officials, recognizing the careful language of a bureaucratic system that had identified what it considered a problem requiring correction.
I'm not sure I understand what irregularities you're referring to, she said. The Altarian leaned forward slightly.
The prosthetic device you currently utilize represents a significant investment in custom medical technology.
Such investment would typically require approval from the Coalition Medical Resource Allocation Board, along with documentation demonstrating that standard accommodations were insufficient to meet your needs. I was told that standard accommodations were incompatible with my biology. Standard accommodations are designed to serve the medical needs of the greatest number of individuals efficiently, the Corvin official explained. Custom solutions are approved only when they provide benefits that justify their additional cost across a larger population base. But, this custom solution does provide benefits.
I can walk normally. I can work effectively.
I can contribute to society instead of requiring ongoing support services.
For one individual, the Valerian noted. The cost-benefit analysis of custom medical solutions must consider broader applications to justify resource expenditure. Zara felt a familiar frustration building.
The same logic that had initially denied her prosthetic options was now being used to question her access to a solution that actually worked.
The humans documented their research, she said.
The techniques they developed can be applied to other cases.
Which brings us to the second irregularity, the Altarian said.
The Human Cultural Exchange Initiative operates outside established Coalition oversight protocols. Their research activities have not been reviewed by appropriate regulatory bodies to ensure compliance with medical safety standards and resource allocation guidelines.
They're helping people who weren't being helped by established systems.
They're creating parallel systems that undermine the efficiency of existing resource allocation, the Corvin corrected. When individuals receive services outside approved channels, it becomes difficult to maintain accurate records of resource distribution and need assessment. The Valerian activated a holographic display showing Coalition organizational charts and resource flow diagrams. Efficient governance requires centralized coordination of services to prevent duplication of effort and ensure optimal allocation of limited resources.
Unauthorized service provision creates inefficiencies that impact the entire system. Zara studied the diagrams, recognizing the logical structure they represented. Every service mapped to specific departments. Every resource tracked through established channels. Every individual need addressed through standardized procedures. It was comprehensive. It was organized. It was efficient. And it was exactly what had left her hobbling on a makeshift crutch while being told that her problems weren't worth solving. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. The Altarian's crystalline features brightened slightly, a sign that he was pleased to move toward resolution. "We want you to understand that while your current situation represents a positive outcome, the methods used to achieve that outcome cannot be permitted to continue without proper oversight and integration into established systems." Meaning? Meaning that the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative must submit their research and development activities to coalition review, the Corvin explained. Their methods must be evaluated for safety, efficiency, and compatibility with existing protocols. Their services must be integrated into appropriate departments to prevent unauthorized duplication of effort. The Valerian added the final component. And individuals receiving services through their organization must be transitioned to appropriate coalition departments to ensure continued care through approved channels. Zara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You want to shut them down. We want to integrate their valuable work into established systems," the Altarian corrected. "The coalition recognizes that human approaches to problem solving may offer beneficial perspectives. However, these approaches must be properly evaluated and implemented through appropriate oversight to ensure they meet safety and efficiency standards. What if their approaches don't fit into established systems?" The three officials exchanged glances that communicated something Zara couldn't interpret but didn't like. "All beneficial approaches can be integrated into appropriate systems with proper modification," the Corvin said carefully. "The coalition has extensive experience in adapting new technologies and methodologies to work within established frameworks." "And if the humans refuse to submit to coalition oversight?" "Then, their activities would be classified as unauthorized medical practice and unlicensed research," the Valerian stated. "Such activities carry significant legal and administrative consequences under coalition law." Zara left the administrative center with a mandate to inform the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative about the coalition's requirements and a growing understanding of what those requirements actually meant. Integration into coalition systems didn't mean adopting human approaches, it meant modifying human approaches until they conformed to coalition efficiency protocols. She made her way to the human workshop, walking normally on prosthetic legs that the coalition now wanted to regulate through proper channels that had previously determined such legs were impossible to create. The workshop was bustling with its usual productive chaos. Dr. Martinez was consulting with Dr. Chen about neural interface protocols while Dr. Kim tested materials for a custom environmental suit. 3 new engineers had joined the team, and construction had begun on additional laboratory space to accommodate their growing caseload. "Zara." Dr. Martinez looked up from her work with the genuine warmth that Zara had learned to associate with human greetings. "Perfect timing. We've got the preliminary designs ready for the Corvin Sensory Accommodation Project. Your experience with custom interface development will be invaluable for—" She stopped, noticing Zara's expression. "What's wrong?" Zara related her meeting with coalition officials, explaining the requirements for oversight, integration, and transition to approved channels. As she spoke, the bustling activity in the workshop gradually quieted as other team members gathered to listen. "So they want us to submit our research to coalition review," Dr. Chen said when she finished. "They want to integrate your methods into established systems," Zara clarified. "Same thing," Dr. Kim said grimly. "Coalition integration means coalition control. Coalition control means coalition priorities. Coalition priorities mean efficiency protocols. Dr. Martinez sat down heavily in a chair that had been modified for human comfort preferences. "And efficiency protocols mean writing off problems that don't fit existing solutions." "But you'd still be helping people," Zara said. "Just through official channels instead of independent operations." "Would we?" Dr. Martinez asked. Let's think about what coalition oversight would require.
Safety testing that follows established protocols designed for standard applications, not custom solutions.
Efficiency evaluation that measures cost-effectiveness for population-level benefits, evaluation that automatically excludes individual solutions.
Resource allocation through approved channels that have already determined that most of our clients aren't worth helping.
Dr. Chen nodded agreement.
Everything we do works because we ignore efficiency protocols in favor of solution protocols. Take that away, and we become another coalition department that provides standard services to standard cases.
The people we help would be transitioned to appropriate coalition departments for continued care, Zara said, repeating the official language.
The people we help are here because appropriate coalition departments told them their problems couldn't be solved, Dr. Kim pointed out. Transitioning them back to those departments means telling them their problems can't be solved, again, but with proper paperwork this time.
Dr. Martinez stood and walked to a wall chart tracking their current projects. 23 active cases. 47 completed solutions.
12 research initiatives developing knowledge that could help future cases.
The coalition isn't wrong about efficiency, she said finally.
Their approach works for the vast majority of people. They've created remarkable systems that provide excellent services to millions of individuals across dozens of species.
But, Dr. Chen prompted.
But, efficiency protocols inherently create categories of people who don't fit standard solutions. And, once you've categorized someone as incompatible with existing systems, those systems become very good at proving that they're correct.
She gestured to Zara's prosthetic leg. Zara wasn't incompatible with prosthetic technology. Zara was incompatible with coalition prosthetic protocols that didn't allow time for biological adaptation.
The technology worked fine once we ignored the protocols and focused on making it work.
So you refuse coalition oversight? Zara asked. We probably don't have a choice about accepting oversight, Dr. Martinez admitted.
But, we might have choices about how we respond to it. Dr. Chen looked up from the research notes he had been studying.
What if we comply with oversight requirements while maintaining our solution-focused approach? How would that work? We submit our research for coalition review as required.
We document our safety protocols and efficiency metrics according to their specifications.
We operate through approved channels where possible. And, where it's not possible,
we find ways to make it possible, Dr. Kim said.
Coalition systems are comprehensive, but they're not omniscient.
They have gaps.
They have exceptions.
They have provisions for special circumstances and cultural considerations. Dr. Martinez began to smile, the expression of someone recognizing possibilities that others might miss.
Cultural considerations. Humans are still in integration phase. We have cultural exchange permits that allow certain flexibilities in how we operate. Permits that could be expanded to cover research and development activities. Permits that could be used to create a framework for human-style problem-solving within coalition oversight structures.
Dr. Chen caught on to the direction of her thinking. Instead of fighting coalition efficiency protocols, we use coalition bureaucracy protocols.
Every form filed correctly.
Every requirement met precisely. Every regulation followed exactly. But, we use those protocols to create space for approaches that efficiency protocols wouldn't allow.
Zara watched the human team develop their strategy with growing admiration for their determination to find solutions even when the problems involved their own organizational survival. What do you need me to do? She asked.
Help us understand coalition bureaucracy from the perspective of someone who's lived within their systems, Dr. Martinez said.
We need to learn how to work with coalition oversight instead of around it. And if they still shut you down? Dr. Martinez looked around the workshop at the evidence of human determination to solve problems that others had abandoned.
Custom solutions, experimental projects, and ongoing research that served no purpose except helping individuals who had been told their needs weren't worth meeting. Then, we find other ways to help people, she said simply. Humans have this annoying tendency to refuse to accept that problems can't be solved.
Even when the problem is the system that's supposed to solve problems? Especially then. As Zara prepared to leave the workshop that evening, she found herself thinking about the difference between integration and assimilation. The coalition wanted to integrate human approaches into existing systems, to modify and regulate human methods until they conformed to coalition standards. Humans wanted to integrate their solutions into coalition civilization to help individuals whose needs weren't being met while learning to work within established structures. Both approaches involved change and adaptation. But only one approach preserved the essential human characteristic that had made her prosthetic leg possible: the refusal to accept that individual problems weren't worth solving. Walking home through the lower district, moving normally on legs that existed because humans believed her problems were worth solving, Zara realized that she was about to discover what happened when human stubbornness met coalition bureaucracy. It was going to be interesting. And if the humans were right about their approach to impossible problems, it was also going to be successful. Even if success looked different than anyone expected. 1 year after the Coalition Oversight Review, the Human Cultural Exchange Initiative had transformed into something that surprised everyone, including the humans who ran it. The organization now operated as the officially recognized Department of Individual Solutions, with full coalition approval, proper bureaucratic classification, and a charter that explicitly authorized their mission to develop custom assistance for cases that fell outside standard service parameters. They had government funding, regulatory oversight, and formal integration into coalition administrative structures. They also had a waiting list of over 3,000 individuals representing 47 different species across 12 star systems. Zara stood in the main conference room of their expanded facility, reviewing quarterly reports that documented the department's impact with mathematical precision that would satisfy even Altarian efficiency analysts. Cost-benefit ratios that demonstrated long-term value. Resource allocation metrics that showed investment returns. Population-level benefits derived from individual solution development. The coalition loves data, Dr. Martinez had explained during their transition to official status. So we learned to generate data that demonstrates the value of what we do in terms they understand. The transformation hadn't been easy. Human approaches to problem solving had required translation into coalition bureaucratic language. Solution-focused methodologies became alternative resource allocation protocols. Creative engineering became non-standard technical development. The refusal to abandon difficult cases became comprehensive service continuity. But the translation process had also revealed something unexpected. Coalition systems were more flexible than they initially appeared. Beneath layers of efficiency protocols and standardized procedures lay provisions for exceptional circumstances, cultural accommodations, and experimental programs that could authorize activities that seemed impossible under normal circumstances. The key, Dr. Chen had discovered, is understanding that coalition bureaucracy is like any other complex system. It has official functions and unofficial capabilities. The official functions handle standard cases efficiently. The unofficial capabilities can be activated when someone understands which forms to file and which regulations to reference. The humans had become experts at navigating unofficial capabilities. They had also become teachers. Half of their current staff consisted of coalition species who had learned human approaches to individual problem solving. Altarians who specialized in developing mathematical models for custom solutions. Corvin who had mastered the art of engineering equipment for unique specifications. Valerian who had become philosophers of individual need assessment. We're not just solving individual problems anymore, Dr. Kim explained to a group of visiting officials from other star systems. We're developing methodologies that other organizations can use to solve individual problems within their own systems. The visitors' administrators from coalition departments throughout the galaxy had come to study what had become known as the New Meridian model for addressing optimization gaps. What had started as human stubbornness about helping one thought walk normally had evolved into a systematic approach for identifying and addressing needs that fell through the cracks of even the most comprehensive social systems. The fundamental insight, Dr. Martinez explained to the delegation, is that efficiency and effectiveness serve different purposes. Efficiency minimizes resource expenditure per unit of benefit.
Effectiveness maximizes problem resolution regardless of resource requirements.
Most situations benefit from efficiency optimization. Some situations require effectiveness optimization.
And how do you determine which approach to use? Asked a Corvin administrator from the Outer Rim colonies.
Cost-benefit analysis that includes long-term knowledge development, Zara answered, reading from charts that documented their decision-making process. Individual solutions that create transferable knowledge have population-level benefits that justify effectiveness optimization. Individual solutions that don't create transferable knowledge are evaluated through standard efficiency protocols. It was an elegant framework that satisfied coalition requirements for logical resource allocation while preserving space for human-style individual problem-solving. More importantly, it was producing results that even skeptical coalition departments couldn't ignore. The prosthetic adaptation protocols developed for Zara had been successfully applied to 43 other individuals representing 12 species. The neural interface techniques pioneered for Thok anatomy had led to breakthrough developments in cross-species medical compatibility. The custom engineering approaches had evolved into standardized procedures for equipment modification that served thousands of individuals whose needs didn't match original design specifications. Individual solutions, Dr. Martinez continued her presentation, often reveal optimization opportunities that benefit much larger populations. We're not just helping people who don't fit existing systems.
We're improving existing systems to fit more people.
What about cases that don't lead to broader applications? Asked an Altarian researcher from the Central Administration.
We help them anyway, Dr. Chen said simply. Because determining which individual solutions will lead to broader benefits is impossible to predict in advance. And, because helping individuals has value regardless of broader applications. The room fell quiet.
That last statement represented pure human philosophy, untranslated into coalition efficiency language.
It was the idea that individual problems were worth solving simply because individuals mattered, not because solving their problems served larger systemic purposes.
That approach seems.
The Altarian paused, searching for diplomatic language, resource-intensive.
It is, Dr. Martinez agreed. But, it's also comprehensive. Coalition systems excel at solving problems that affect large numbers of people efficiently. Human approaches excel at solving problems that affect small numbers of people effectively.
Together, we can address needs across the entire spectrum of individual and population-level challenges.
And the resource requirements for such comprehensive coverage? Dr. Kim activated a display showing their financial analysis. Lower than expected.
It turns out that most individual problems aren't actually expensive to solve, they're just expensive to solve within systems designed for different types of problems. When you design solutions specifically for individual needs, the resource requirements become much more manageable. Plus, Zara added, individuals who receive effective help become contributing members of society instead of individuals who require ongoing support services. The long-term cost-benefit analysis favors effectiveness optimization even for cases that don't lead to broader applications. The delegation spent 3 days studying the Department of Individual Solutions, interviewing clients, reviewing case studies, and analyzing operational methodologies. When they departed, each carried authorization to establish similar programs within their own star systems.
We're franchising human stubbornness, Dr. Chen observed as they watched the delegation's transport leave New Meridian Spaceport.
We're sharing problem-solving methodologies, Dr. Martinez corrected.
Human stubbornness is just the cultural framework that makes those methodologies possible. And if other species don't have the cultural framework? Then, they'll develop their own frameworks, Zara said. The important thing isn't thinking like humans.
The important thing is thinking about individual problems as challenges worth solving instead of limitations worth accepting. 3 months later, Zara received a message that brought her full circle from where her journey had started. The sender was identified as Dr. Kellen Thok, Chief Medical Administrator for the Thok Colonial Health Services.
Greetings, Zara.
We have received documentation of the prosthetic adaptation protocols developed for Thok anatomy through the Department of Individual Solutions.
Our medical review board has approved these protocols for implementation across all Thok colonies.
We would like to invite you to serve as a consultant for training our medical staff in these new procedures. We are particularly interested in your expertise regarding the integration of human problem-solving methodologies with THOC healthcare systems.
Zara read the message twice, processing the implications.
Her individual problem had generated solutions that would help other THOC facing similar challenges. Her species would no longer have to choose between accepting disability and undergoing genetic modification to become compatible with coalition medical technology.
But, more than that, other THOC would learn human approaches to problem solving.
They would understand that individual challenges could be addressed through creative engineering and determined effort. They would discover the difference between accepting limitations and working to overcome limitations.
Good news?
Dr. Martinez asked, noticing Zara's expression.
Transformative news, Zara replied.
It looks like human stubbornness is about to become THOC stubbornness.
That's how cultural change works, Dr. Martinez said. One solved problem at a time.
That evening, Zara walked home through the lower district, her movement natural and unconscious on legs that existed because humans had refused to accept that her problem couldn't be solved. But the district itself had changed around her. The population was smaller now, not because conditions had worsened, but because fewer people needed to live there. The Department of Individual Solutions had addressed many of the chronic problems that had previously trapped residents in the lower district. Individuals with unique medical needs now had access to custom treatments. People with non-standard capabilities had found work that matched their abilities.
Families dealing with rare challenges received support that helped them integrate into mainstream society.
The district still served its function as housing for people whose needs didn't fit standard systems. But it was no longer a place where people went to be forgotten by systems that couldn't help them. It had become a place where people went while custom solutions were being developed to help them.
Zara!
The call came from behind her, and she turned to see Dr. Chen approaching with a young human she didn't recognize.
Dr. Chen. Good to see you.
I want you to meet Dr. Lisa Park, Dr. Chen said. She's our new director of methodology development.
She'll be working on systematizing our approaches so other departments can implement similar programs.
Dr. Park extended her hand in the human greeting gesture that Zara had learned to appreciate.
Dr. Chen tells me that you are our first successful case study. Your prosthetic development established many of the protocols we're now teaching throughout the coalition.
It's good to know that my stubborn refusal to accept limitations served a larger purpose, Zara said. Actually, Dr. Park replied, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations was the larger purpose.
Everything else is just documentation.
As they parted ways and Zara continued toward her apartment, she found herself thinking about the journey from needing a leg to helping establish methodologies for addressing individual needs throughout galactic civilization. It had started with one human who appeared when nobody else cared enough to help. It had continued with a team of humans who believed that individual problems were worth solving. It had evolved into a coalition-wide recognition that comprehensive social systems required provisions for addressing needs that didn't fit standard solutions. And it had succeeded because humans had taught other species something they had forgotten during their journey toward efficient civilization, that refusing to let anyone fall through the cracks wasn't just compassion. It was also good policy. Zara paused at her apartment entrance, looking back toward the lights of the industrial district where the Department of Individual Solutions continued its work. Tomorrow, she would begin preparations for her consultation work with THOC.